Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the books that I've been reading this week. I've just been on holiday, so there was quite a lot of reading. I say that. I had a few days where I just couldn't really focus on reading at all, and then a few days where I just was in full book mode and managed to devour quite a lot. So I'm going to be talking about a few of the books that I read during that time. I've also been catching up on some of my Booker Prize reading. I'm slowly getting there towards the sort of finishing the project of reading all of the Booker Prize shortlisted books since the start of the prize in '69, which is wild because I think I've now got about 15 or so to go, which is wild. We're getting there. So hopefully before too long, I will have that, and I'll have a few more bookery bits coming up soon as well. But anyway, let's get talking about the books that I've been reading this week. First, starting with a bit of a classic. So this is Agatha Christie with The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And I have to confess, this is the first Agatha Christie book I've ever read. I know, which just seems ridiculous, but like I feel like growing up in the UK, you are surrounded by Agatha Christie stories, predominantly through some of the TV versions. So the Poirot series, through some of the other televised ones, through sometimes film versions, all of those kinds of things. And so I think as a result, I had this really sort of a lot of knowledge, I guess, of Agatha Christie stories, but without ever having read them as a complete thing. And what was so interesting for me reading this is just seeing kind of what everyone had been talking about with some of the ways that she structures her stories. Because I think when you see them in a televised version, they do work very well. The British adaptations of them are normally very, very good. But I think there's something about the reading them and realizing the little ways that she is dropping things in. And before, I will eventually talk about the book, don't worry. But I remember at one point reading an article about there was something about the way somebody analysed the ways that Agatha Christie writes her stories, and the ways that she often creates tension with certain word choices earlier in a book. And so before somebody is actually murdered, there might be something that happens that is, there's a murderous, something else that's described as murderous, a murderous sound, or a brutal shadow or something, I don't know. But the way that she subtly foreshadows a lot of that and keeps you, keeps the tension high and keeps you thinking that something's about to happen even before the thing actually does happen. And so I really loved this. I thought this was a really interesting story, and there's a lot I can't say about it because there is a big twist at the heart of this. But essentially, as is with most of her stories, we start this story with a murder and try to uncover it. This is a Poirot story, and as Poirot is investigating it, there are quite a few details that come up that seem completely irrelevant early on. So what kind of boot was this man wearing? Did somebody move a chair a couple of inches forward? Did somebody make a phone call at this time or this time? All of these little details start to come up. But what I think is really particularly genius about the way this book is written is, again, without spoiling it, there is a good deal where this book relies on the reader following certain either red herrings or certain patterns of what's being said that ultimately come to provide a real sort of floor drop moment towards the end of the book, where actually everything suddenly changes on a dime, spins on a dime, whatever that expression is. Everything just suddenly shifts in this really brilliant way that made me immediately want to go back and reread this to look for clues about it all the way through. So yeah, fun to read a murder mystery, and particularly in Agatha Christie. This is, as sort of long-time viewers may know, quite different to what I typically read, and I'm very, very glad for the difference here. Next up, we have Panenka by Rónán Hession. And Rónán Hession is one of those authors where the two other books of his that I've read, I think are exquisite. And probably rank amongst some of my favourite books of all time. And this book is no exception. I just love the way Rónán Hession writes. It's that lovely thing where you find a writer who I think you and that writer kind of just find there's something about the way that they write that really just tickles your brain. And this is very, very much the case here. So particularly what I normally love, what I have loved as well in Rónán Hession's books before, has been the real blend of absurdity and tragedy, but where everything is happening and there are these incredibly dark moments happening to characters, but there is something utterly lovable about every character. No character is written off as just the evil one or the unlovable one, or whatever. There is always something to redeem. And in this book, redemption is a big part. The core part involves a character who's known most of the book as Panenka, and he had a moment when he was in his mid-20s where he made a mistake or a series of mistakes and became sort of pushed out and was sort of persona non grata in many parts of his local community. And this has utterly wrecked him. We see him again 25 years later, a man in his 50s, just really struggling because he, in many ways, has missed out on a lot of life. He is somebody who, even now, people are still remember him a certain way from something he did 25 years ago, and they still talk about him in a certain way, and he's still seen as unredeemable to some people, and yet he's trying to re-piece together a life and find who he can be. And there's something just so beautiful about it. It's a book that on the surface wouldn't necessarily be my typical fare. It involves football, which is a sport I have watched. I know it exists. I have enjoyed it before, but not one that I follow a great deal. And sometimes a topic I find difficult when it's written about, because I think I don't care about football enough to necessarily love hearing about it in a book. But I think in this book, firstly, it wears the football stuff quite lightly. But secondly, it's more of a plot point to something else. It's the Panenka is a football term that becomes a nickname for him. And again, in some ways, the nicknaming of him becomes part of this branding of him as an unredeemable figure in the community. And yet we see these little moments where he shows love to people around him, or where he is wanting to be loved by others. And I just think it's so beautifully done. It's so tender and gorgeous, as well as being very funny. There are really silly, absurd moments in this book, which is what I've come to love from Rónán Hession books, the way that he's able to throw out absolute absurdity and silliness, and then in the same line or on the same page, something utterly crushing, but also utterly tender and beautiful. It's just, he's a gift to writing, I think. And this book was just such a beautiful book. And last but not least, we have Youngman by Sullivan. And these are his selected diaries. And it's interesting for a variety of reasons. Essentially, Sullivan is a trans man, and in these diaries, we see him through various parts of his identity and coming to terms with it. So we meet him as somebody who, at least at the time, presents and thinks of themselves as a young girl. And they are sort of exploring their first tentative bits of dating and crushes and sexuality. And then as they get older, they slowly start to realize a little bit about their identity. They start thinking, well, I kind of like men, I also kind of like women. I'm not quite sure where I sit on this, but also I want to like men as a man. I think I'm a gay man and not actually a straight woman, or I'm not actually maybe a queer woman, or whatever else. And so this that we see through years of diaries, how he eventually gets to an understanding of who he is. And there's something really beautiful about the way it's done, because we see these early diary entries that feel exactly like it is to be a teenager, full of, everything is the best and the worst thing of, I'm friends with this person, oh no wait, this person's really upset me, I'm no longer friends with them, oh wait, I'm best friends with them again tomorrow, that kind of thing. And the absolute intensity of everything you feel at that age, and how feelings of not being right, not feeling right in your body, particularly for someone who is sort of raised as a young girl, is just sort of, there's so much that's going on for them. And I just think it becomes so interesting seeing this development of Lou's life. And particularly when we look at the later diaries, we have Lou as a really confident trans man who is having a lot of sex and is really enjoying himself. And there is something so interesting about seeing that whole move and change from their younger life to now. Yeah, it's a really interesting insight, I think, into trans male identities, and particularly someone who is a trans man and identifies as gay. And yeah, I just thought this was really, really touching. It looks a bit longer than it is. The pages do go quite quickly because they're quite short excerpts. And eventually, you know, through time, we also see how the way they think about the world and the way they talk about themselves changes. But yeah, I really loved kind of getting to this end point where he just seems so much more confident, and it just becomes almost these confessions of like a really bawdy, sort of messy and sexual time, and it's really fun and really affirming in many ways as well to read. So those are the books that I've been reading this week. I will have more book of stuff coming before too long as well, hopefully. I hope you are keeping really well. Take care and have a wonderful week. Bye bye.